The 2024 Missouri Senate race will see incumbent Republican Senator Josh Hawley face off against Democratic challenger and former U.S. Marine Lucas Kunce. In today's video, we will be taking a closer look and analysis of this race and the two candidates. Josh Hawley was first elected to the Senate in 2019 after defeating the incumbent Democratic senator at the time, Claire McCaskill. Before this, Hawley served as Attorney General of the state of Missouri, and at the time of his election to the Senate was only 39, making him at the time the youngest U.S. senator. Hawley received Trump's endorsement in 2019, and while Trump was in office, Hawley was one of his closest allies in the Senate. A lot of Hawley's first term in the Senate has been characterized by him going up against big tech, even reaching across the aisle in 2021 to introduce the bipartisan American Innovation and Choice Online Act, which would, quote, "This bill prohibits certain large online platforms from engaging in specified acts, including giving preference to their own products on the platform, unfairly limiting the availability on the platform of competing products for another business, or discriminating in the application or enforcement of the platform's term of service among similarly situated users," according to Congress.gov. The bill would also give antitrust enforcers more authority to hold online platforms accountable when they break antitrust regulations. And this has kind of been the whole thing with Hawley. For so long now, the GOP has come to be known as the party of small government, or free trade, or free markets. But in recent years, really as a result of Trump and his MAGA movement, there's been a shift towards a populism within the GOP, and the GOP has become more and more willing to use governmental authority, especially when they see it as protecting Americans and workers, even if it means intervening in businesses. And Josh Hawley has kind of been the embodiment of this trend in the Senate, not only when it comes to antitrust action, but tariffs as well. Although it put him against many in his own party who preferred more of a free trade policy when it came to trade, Hawley was one of Trump's most vocal supporters when it came to the president's tariffs, taking Trump's protectionist approach to trade. Hawley, even as recently as February of 2024, has proposed increasing tariffs on China, which leads to Hawley's other policy position, being one of the most vocal critics of China in the Senate, being a vocal supporter of the Hong Kong protest, and a vocal critic of TikTok, supporting its ban through multiple bills, even introducing his own ban in 2023, the No TikTok on United States Devices Act, which did not pass. Hawley's also been a staunch proponent of social conservatism, making appearances at National Conservatism, speaking about topics such as the consequences of the sexual revolution and the importance of avoiding premarital sex. Hawley is also a staunch supporter of Trump's border wall and supported his controversial family separation policy, as well as the Remain in Mexico policy. Hawley points to what he believes is insufficient border security as one of the main proponents of the fentanyl epidemic in Missouri, one of the hardest hit states by the epidemic. And when it comes to foreign policy, he, like many in the MAGA America First movement, take more of an isolationist approach when it comes to foreign policy, opposing war in the Middle East, and he also does not support funding the war in Ukraine or the expansion of NATO to include Ukraine. This often has put him into conflict with more neoconservative, war hawkish members of his party, such as Tom Cotton. Hawley, however, does support Israel. Hawley has also been a vocal proponent of not allowing trans athletes to compete in women's sports, but perhaps is most controversial and most famous for his actions on January 6, 2020, when he objected to the certification of the Electoral College, and the picture of Hawley's raised fist on that day would go viral. So that's who we have on one side of the race, the incumbent. But let's take a look at his Democratic challenger, Lucas Kunce. Kunce is the Democratic nominee for the 2024 Senate race in Missouri, defeating 3 other candidates in the primary. He previously served in the U.S. Marine Corps from 2007 until 2020. In 2022, actually, when Roy Blunt, the other senator for Missouri at the time, announced he would be retiring and not seeking re-election, Lucas actually ran for this seat. However, he would be defeated in the Democratic primary. A lot of Kunce's campaign has been built on being pro-labor, and it's safe to say Kunce has made a real attempt to make himself look like the pro-labor candidate in this race. He has received the backing of several unions, and according to a page on his website, he wants to revitalize the WARN Act. Among other things, this plan proposed by Kunce would ban the sale of American companies and vital industries to any foreign entity, which is primarily a response to Chinese acquisition of American companies over the past 2 decades. One thing Hawley and Kunce probably agree more than disagree on is the threat of China, although their approach to it may differ. Kunce's plans would also modify the bankruptcy code to prioritize back pay above all other claims in bankruptcy proceedings. Kunce is also a staunch supporter of reproductive rights, attacking what he calls Josh Hawley's abortion extremism. This November, there is a ballot measure in Missouri on whether or not to legalize abortion in the state, as abortion is currently illegal in all cases except a medical emergency, and Kunce supports making abortion legal in the state once again. Kunce also draws a stark contrast with Hawley on foreign policy, as Kunce does support continuing aid for Ukraine in their war against Russia. Kunce, like Hawley, also has campaigned heavily around the issue of the border, also pointing to the lack of border security as fueling Missouri's fentanyl crisis in part. At the time of me making this video, Kunce and Hawley have debated one time already and are scheduled for their second and final debate on October 31st. And also at the time of me making this video, Hawley is currently an 8-point favorite in this race, and his seat is pretty much a safe red seat. Republicans are, at the time of making this video, pretty much guaranteed to win this seat. Hawley is pretty much guaranteed to win his re-election, also considering Trump won the state by 15 points in 2020. But I think the interesting question will be to see whether he wins the state by a larger margin than what he did in 2019 or by a smaller margin than what he did in 2019. And that, folks, pretty much concludes today's video. I think what I'm going to start doing is trying to cover as many of these Senate races as I can before the election. I won't be able to cover them all, but I'm going to be trying to cover as many of them as possible. Possibly the ones I don't get to, I'll just compile into one large video right before the election. I'll just quickly cover each race I haven't covered yet in its own separate video, briefly in one large video. But we'll just have to see. But what I can tell you is that next Friday we will be covering the Texas Senate race. This is probably one of the hottest Senate races in the 2024 cycle. Of course, you have Ted Cruz, the incumbent. I don't actually know off the top of my head what term this would be for him. But of course, you have him going against Representative Colin Aldred, and there's kind of been a trend in this state with Cruz. Each time he's up for re-election, he wins the state by a smaller and smaller margin. But we'll talk about that race more and more in next week's video. Until next week's videos, stay safe, everyone. Comment down below any thoughts you have on this Missouri 2024 Senate race. And until next time, folks, Real Politics is out.